You're finally there. You're ready to build a less restrictive and rather more supportive relationship with food. You understand the harms associated with restrictive eating patterns, dieting, and disordered eating, and you don't want to head down that path. I'm so excited that you're ready to make these shifts. But there's one obstacle that continues to get in your way when it comes to building an adequate meal plan. And that's your fear of gaining weight.
I'm Rachel Fine, registered dietitian nutritionist and founder of To The Point Nutrition. A dancer's performance is a direct result of hard work and motivation. So where does food fit into this? There's a lot of myths and a ton of antiquated ideals, and I'm here to dispel those.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fine. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist working with dancers to help them build more supportive mealtime habits. In the process, we learn how to dismantle food rules, make peace with food, and utilize nutrition information and the principles of performance nutrition, but without obsessing over it. In today's discussion, we're chatting about why dancers fear weight gain, how it can be super limiting to their progress, both in the studio and out, and ultimately how dancers can begin to dismantle and navigate through this fear. In my over decade experience working as a dietitian for dancers, I'm thrilled to see the shifts happening with dancers starting to recognize the importance of an adequate fuel plan. But despite these shifts, so many dancers still feel limited in how much they can eat, what they can eat, when they can eat, all because of a fear of what will happen to their bodies. And I've been there too. I was once convinced that gaining pounds on the scale meant my professional dance career would be non-existent. What I didn't realize at the time was that this fear was driving me further away from my performance potential, leaving me closer to burnout and ultimately at a higher risk of injury. Given the intensity of unfortunate body ideals that still saturate the dance industry and the culture at large, feeling fearful over the changes that can happen to your body once you start eating adequately are extremely valid. In fact, sometimes it can feel nearly impossible for a dancer to not fear what might happen to their bodies when they start eating adequately. Worrying about whether you'll feel or look, and I quote, out of shape, challenges with partnering, and even the realities of costume fittings are just some of the reasons why so many dancers fear the potential for weight gain. And from a larger perspective, fears of weight gain stem from cultural weight stigma and the experiences and social assumptions that one might face in the culture at large. Examples are assumptions like higher weights equating to following, and I quote, unhealthy eating habits, fearing that higher weights are less successful, less attractive by cultural standards of beauty. There's many ways in which cultural weight stigma shows up for dancers, and those cannot be ignored as we begin to recognize why you might be fearful of gaining weight. During a layoff, during times not spent dancing, it's very possible that you might gain weight. It's also possible that you might lose weight. And it's even possible that your weight might stay the same. Most often, this depends on your baseline eating patterns. If you're starting to rebuild your relationship with food and eating adequately throughout your day is coming from a place that was previously severely undernourished, then it's very possible that your body might need to gain weight in order to support your metabolic and physical functioning. In fact, it is nearly impossible for a clinician like myself to tell you or predict for you how your body will personally respond to adequate nourishment. And if there is a practitioner who is promising you very specific results regarding body changes, whether they're promising that they can get you to lose weight, whatever it might be, then I'm going to encourage that you proceed with caution, because most likely they're selling a very restrictive eating pattern that's not going to support you in the long haul. In regards to weight, what matters is our body's set point. And though it's not widely accepted by the mainstream just yet, there are many more factors that play a role in our body's weight. One of such is genetics. In regard to your set point weight range, this encompasses a range where your body can settle at and feel that it can function optimally. A good way to identify your set point weight is a weight range that doesn't need to be maintained through restrictive eating patterns or exhaustive exercise routines. It's a weight where our bodies reflect optimal metabolic and physical functioning. You experience a natural ebb and flow of hunger and fullness cues, you're fueling your body consistently and regularly throughout the day, and you're not needing to micromanage every bite for the purpose of ultimately micromanaging that number on the scale. For younger dancers, especially dancers younger than 20 years of age, it's very likely that you haven't yet reached your set point weight range. So attempting to achieve and maintain one specific weight or range is going to be practically impossible, especially as your body is still growing. Many factors do impact our set point weight. As I mentioned earlier, genetics is one such factor. But so is a previous history of dieting. In fact, we often see previous dieting history as a reason for an increase in one's set point weight. The reason for this, when we diet or restrict our food choices, our body does whatever it has to do to fight for homeostasis. In doing so, it adapts its metabolism, lowering it as a means to adapt to that self-imposed state of starvation. It's trying to conserve energy because it doesn't know when it's getting an energy replenishment. This is why it's incredibly important for dancers to lean into resources that help to promote adequate nourishment throughout their day. So what does it take to let go of a fear of weight gain? As I mentioned earlier, fear of weight gain is one of the most common barriers, preventing a dancer from eating more and sufficiently throughout their day. And despite all of the facts that I mentioned above, and the consequences that we know from underfueling, specifically relative energy deficiency in sport, that syndrome of negative complications that often result in burnout and injury, dancers still feel very limited in their ability to move past stringent food rules. The overarching fear is that a non-diet approach will result in a body type that's not otherwise deemed, and I quote, acceptable by dance standards. Now, just a disclaimer. As a dietitian who holds several privileges, including the privilege of living in a body that society does deem to be, quote, acceptable or thin, I realize and acknowledge it is much easier for me to sit here and have these conversations about fears of weight gain because I cannot claim to experience the systemic stigma that others might feel when moving through life in a larger body. With that being said, as a dietitian who has worked with so many dancers over the last decade, I can tell you that the shifts that dancers experience when starting to unravel their fears around weight gain, allowing them to build more supportive relationships with food and more supportive meal plans, is exponential, especially to their dance performance. The bottom line, diets don't work for dancers. Arguably, they don't work for anyone, but especially for dancers who need mental and physical support to perform at their best. Obsessing about food and attempting to micromanage our bodies is not going to help our performance potential. In order to address fears of weight gain, we first need to recognize the importance of unlearning a lot of anti-fat messaging that has come our way through the years. It also often involves a very proactive approach at navigating through anxieties of the unknown. The unknowns of what might happen to one's body should they start to eat an adequate amount of food each day can surface a lot of anxiety in of itself for dancers. Simultaneous to all of this is working to unravel body image challenges, including increasing levels of body dissatisfaction and body dysmorphia. A key takeaway: dismantling fears over gaining weight takes time. It's not something that can happen overnight, and more often than not, it benefits alongside the support of a professional, such as a registered dietitian nutritionist to help with supportive meal planning and a mental health therapist to navigate through the mindset blocks that often come our way. We've discussed the roots of the fear of weight gain, and we even identified why dancers often experience this fear. But now we want to start to rewire our own thoughts towards weight gain. The process of fact-checking, leaning into helpful neutral affirmations can all be helpful in the process. First, let's assess what would happen if we were able to, and I quote, control our weight on the scale. We're likely to feel very obsessed with the numbers. We're likely to start behaviors like calorie counting, which further takes our attention away from our abilities in the studio. We're also likely to base our daily mood on that specific number. So as you can see, weight tracking is in of itself a very impractical and even harmful habit that can impede on your day-to-day. These experiences can consume you. Instead, let's try and focus a bit on what life might look like without obsessions around food and body. Think about what you might lose if you are overly fixated on your weight or on the calories you're eating in a day. If there's anything that you gain from knowing these numbers, can you think of another way to meet these needs, a way that might be more productive? Perhaps it's building connections with friends or family members around topics that don't have anything to do with dieting or weight. Another helpful tool in this work is to rely on some affirmations. Focus on neutral body affirmations, as this might be more approachable. Examples include, my body deserves to be taken care of with nourishing meals and snacks. I am learning how to love my body, even if I'm not quite there yet. I want to treat my body with love and respect. And last but certainly not least, consider how valuable your time is currently, especially in your dancing. Is that time really worth wasting on fixating on a number on the scale? I'm going to say likely it's not worth it. So if you're scared of gaining weight, then I want you to open doors to the potential for this to not be a motivator for you, but rather for this to be an obstacle, preventing you from achieving your performance potential. Validating your fear is important, but so is dismantling and unraveling it. Utilizing some of the actionable tips from this discussion can help, and as I mentioned earlier, seeking professional support. Working alongside a registered dietitian nutritionist with advanced certifications in intuitive eating and disordered eating can help throughout this process, alongside the work of a mental health therapist. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the takeaways it can bring in helping you build more supportive mealtime habits. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon.